Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the legend of the Crimson Avtar, part 3. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. Deep inside a rocky forest, the blonde Avtar was sitting cross-legged in front of a campfire he had made a while ago, cooking the fish he had caught as he pulled out the map he had gotten from the old merchant, to find out how much further he was away from the village. I'm not that far from the village now. If I run at the same pace I have been for the past day and a half, I would reach it in a mere couple of minutes, pondered the blonde, but it does get tiring running at shinobi speeds, walking at normal pace wouldn't hurt. Then he heard a loud growl coming from around him and grabbed the sword by the hilt in case a beast tried to jump him to make a meal out of him, but the growl was heard again and this time was louder. Blinking, Naruto looked at his stomach and patted, feeling it growling as it told him that his stomach was on empty and the smell of his dinner being ready just made him even more hungrier. Placing the sword against the rock, the blonde sat down and reached for one of the fish, ready to dig into his meal till a loud rumbling noise was heard through the forest as the ground began to quake for a while. Moving his eyes from side to side, trying to sense where the quake came from but couldn't pinpoint its source, so shrugging his shoulders, the blonde opened his mouth wide enough to take a big bite out of his untouched meal, but an even stronger quake shook through the forest. Strong enough to cause Naruto to lose grip of his meal as it landed on the dirt, making him go anime teary-eye as he mourned that didn't had nothing to fill his empty stomach, but then turned serious as he heard the sound of crumbling rocks nearby. Grabbing his sword, he went to investigate who was responsible. As he got closer and closer, he hid behind a tree trunk and looked up ahead, noticing a young teen wearing the usual Earth Kingdom clothing, with long dark brown hair with a bun of hair on top of his head with a green bandana wrapped around his head to keep some of the hair reaching his face. Practicing earthbending as he moved large boulders of rock around before slamming them against the terrain, creating another rumble across the forest, making Naruto raise his eyebrows in mild surprise. So that's what created the tremors, remarked the blonde. Then he sat on the trunk to watch the kid go through his drills, impressing him a bit. Not bad, but he still has years ahead to fully master earthbending. Then a thought came to mind as another tremor shook. That little bastard made me waste a good fish, muttered the blonde with his eyes going thin-lined. Oh well, no point in dwelling about it, said the blonde as he got from the trunk and patted his bum to dust off any dirt, now to go get acquainted with the young fella. And so, Naruto walked down the valley while he shouted, "Oi! What's your name?" The teen turned around when he heard Naruto speak, and suddenly got nervous, which surprised the blonde, and surprised him even more when he turned tail and began run away from him, not before he jumped into the air and slightly raised his hands in the air, causing a small rock slide to block the path he was taking as he left a dumbfounded Avtar behind. Now that was rude, muttered the blonde as he walked towards the barricade and stood in front of it, placing his hands together in a prayer form in front of him so the blonde could extend his arms forward to the sides with his palms outward turning into fists, causing the rocky barricade to split apart as they crashed within the terrain, clearing the path for him to follow. Might as well follow him, he may be from the village that's occupied by the Fire Nation, pondered the blonde as he went his way. Arriving at the village, the blonde took some time to look around town to see how the situation was around here, not before he got a bite to eat of course, since he was still on an empty stomach. After he had found a food establishment that cooked roasted duck, he went inside and ordered his meal, eating till his stomach was full and paid with a gold coin he had borrowed from one of the pirates from their last encounter. The owner of the establishment said he couldn't give him any change for he didn't have the money to pay him back, but Naruto just shook his head and told him to keep it all, and the owner thanked him kindly as the blonde walked out, making him wonder just how bad the situation was around here. The will of the people are broken, as if they have given up their will to live, though the blonde as he continued to walk through town till he noticed a straw hat that reminded him of the Akatsuki. The only difference was that it was black and it didn't have the tags around it that used to cover their faces. Liking its design, the blonde walked to the stand and reached for it to try it out, and noticed that it fit him perfectly. "How much for the hat, ma'am?" he asked the old lady behind the counter. 10 copper coins, sonny," replied the old lady. The blonde reached into this pouch and pulled out a silver coin and placed it at the table. Keep the change, ma'am, he said as he walked away from the stable only to see the same young teen that had run away from him back at the forest walk inside an item shop, closing the door behind him. So I was correct, you do reside on this village, murmured the blonde as he walked towards the same item shop that the unknown earthbender had walked into. Inside the shop, the teen walked inside the shop with a smile on his face as he greeted the person that stood in front of him as she tended the items that rested on the counter. Hello, mother, greeted the teen, said a wrinkled woman with gray eyes, with the same style of clothing like her son, her long light brown hair singing with the twist of her body as she looked at her son with a stern look. Haru, you're late. Scolded the mother with a frown, but then she smiled softly at her son flinched, get started on your chores. Yes, mother, responded Haru with a small smile on his face, till someone spoke from the entrance of the shop. You know, it's very impolite to run away from someone that's asking for your name, you know, said Naruto as he leaned on the doorframe with his newly bought hat hanging on the back of his neck with a frown on his face, making Haru's mother to be overcautious towards him as she saw her son flinch at the blonde man's claim of where they met. Haru, who's this? She asked him slowly. Glancing at his mother nervously, he replied, no one, mother, he has me confused with someone else. I don't know what game you're playing, but I know you're that earthbender back in the forest, countered the blonde. The eyes of Haru's mother went wide in fear as she heard what her son was doing on his spare time. Quickly she ran towards the blonde and grabbed him by his vest and pulled him inside forcefully, closed the wooden window shields and closed the door, locking it in the process. You were doing what? She exclaimed as she turned her head back, glaring straight at Haru who was fidgeting under her gaze. Mom! He's crazy, don't listen to him, pleaded Haru to his mother, and then pointed at the blonde's attire, I mean, look at the way he is dressed. You know that's dangerous. What would happen if they caught you earthbending, exclaimed the mother with worry in her eyes. Meanwhile, said blonde looked down at his clothing, then looked up with a raised eyebrow looking directly at Haru, voicing out his discontent. Now that's just rude, deadpanned Naruto. Suddenly a knock was heard, causing Haru's mom to peer through the wooden blinds only to see a group of firebenders waiting on the other side of the door waiting patiently. Fire Nation, gasped the mother. Calm down and act natural, suggested the blonde. Taking a deep breath, Haru's mother opened the door to the firebenders, allowing the tax collector to walk in arrogantly as he surveyed the inside of the shop, only to raise an eyebrow at the mysterious man with a black straw hat holding a sword on his hand while he talked to the shop owner's son, minding their own business. What do you want? I already paid you this week, said the woman. Looking at her from the corner of his eyes, the tax collector answered her question. Tax just doubled, you wouldn't want an accident to occur now, wouldn't you? Snidely, he said as he bended a small ball of fire within his hands, causing her to take small steps back in fear, fire sometimes so hard to control, and clasped his hands together to put out the small ember. As he watched the scene, Naruto could not help but grit his teeth in anger while gripping his sword tightly, watching the woman begrudgingly lower her head in resignation and went to collect her safe box where she kept the money and opened it, revealing a couple coins of silver and one of gold, while the rest of the coins were copper. Once the money was given, the tax collector took the copper pieces and dropped them to the ground. You can keep the copper ones, sneered the firebender as he turned towards the door, but stopped once he caught sight of the blonde with half of his face covered by his hat. Walking towards him, he arrogantly sneered at the blonde. You're not from around here, are you? Asked the captain. If you wish to stay in this town, you have to pay a fee. By now he was eyeing the blonde's sword, and this should be enough to pay that fee. The greedy tax collector reached to grab the sword, but Naruto grasped the wrist and squeezed hard, causing the firebender to grit his teeth by the pressure applied in limb. The firebender glared at the blonde, trying to intimidate him. The blonde slowly raised his head up, giving the tax collector a view of his eyes, giving the man a cold chill down his spine as he stared into those eyes, cold iceless, blue eyes that promised certain death. Naruto relinquished his grip from the man's wrist as said man nursed his limb as he backed away with fear evident in his eyes. Yo, you don't know who you're messing with, growled the man as he walked out of the door slamming it shut, leaving the mother to pick the copper coins from the ground while Haru leaned against the counter in anger. How long has this been going on? Asked the blonde as he stared at the door the firebender walked out. For 5 years, responded the mother. Fire Lord Ozai uses our village's coal mines to fuel his ships. They're nothing but thugs, they steal from us and everyone here is too much of a coward to do anything about, growled Haru as he crossed his arms. Be quiet Haru, don't talk like that, scolded his mother. Raising an eyebrow, you're an earthbender, why don't you do something about it? Asked the blonde. Looking at the blonde with a hard stare, earthbending is forbidden, it has caused nothing but misery for the people of this village, he must never use his abilities, she said as she tilted her head at an angry Haru. Never use his abilities? Retorted Naruto as he stared back, you're asking him to give up a part of who he is. What he has is a gift that can light up the courage the people of this village and fight back against the Fire Nation. You don't understand, muttered the mom as she lowered her head. I'll tell you what I understand that he can help fight back. What's the worst thing the Fire Nation can do that they haven't done already? Retorted the blonde. With a heavy sigh, she answered, they could take Haru away just like they took his father. At this response, the blonde flinched, not expecting that kind of response as he saw Haru lowered his head with his eyes closed. Later that day, Naruto was allowed to spend the night at the shed of their home, as Haru opened the doors and showed him inside. My mom says you can spend the night here, but you have to leave tomorrow morning, said the earthbender. I appreciate your kindness, gestured Naruto as he slightly bowed, and I would to apologize for speaking out of turn, I didn't know about your father. Taking a deep sigh, Haru waved it off. That's okay, although it's funny, causing the blonde to raise an eyebrow in curiosity. How so? The way you spoke back at the store and stood up to that firebender, it reminded me of him, he explained as he walked out of the shed with Naruto walking after him as he listened as they both headed out at the forest behind the farm. My father was very courageous. When the Fire Nation invaded, he and the other earthbenders were outnumbered 10-1, but they still fought back anyway. Your father, he sounds like a great man, complimented Naruto, causing Haru to smile fondly. After the attack, they rounded my father and every other earthbender and took them away, haven't heard word from them ever since. And that's why you hide your abilities? Asked the blonde, getting a nod in response as they continued walking into the forest as they stopped at a hill. But the problem is, the only way I can feel close to my father, is when I practice my earthbending. He taught me everything I know, he explained as he looked into the sunset as a long silence descended upon the two. You're lucky, suddenly said the blonde, causing Haru to look at him in surprise. Why would you say that? I was born an orphan into this world, I have no memories of my parents for they died right after I was born, but the only memories I have of them are the stories of the people that knew and fought alongside them, telling me how great people they both were as they care more for others than themselves. Explained the Avatar as he turned around and began to walk towards the forest, with Haru following behind him. But that isn't enough, is it? The young earthbender asked him. No, it isn't, replied the blonde quietly, and both took a long way back as they slowly walked to the house through the road that took them the mines. As the mines came to view, a loud explosion occurred as a cry of help reached their ears. Help! The mines! Exclaimed Haru as he ran towards the mines with Naruto following suit. Once they reached the mine, they saw an old man being squished by the crumbling dirt. Help me! Cried the elderly man. Both Naruto and Haru rushed in and tried to hold the rocks from falling as they pushed back. It's no use, we are not strong enough, grunted the blonde. Push harder. Grunted Haru back. But the mine began to crumble louder as the rocks continued to fall. Haru, there's only one way of getting out of this, the blonde told the earthbender next to him. I can't, said Haru as he looked away. If you don't do it, we are going to be buried as well. Haru thought about it and saw that there was no other option, and so, with determination, Haru left his post to get in front of the mine, and assumed his earthbending stance. Naruto saw the fierce concentration of the young man as the miniature rocks stopped falling in mid-air, and with a step forward, he made a twist movement, shooting both fists forward in the end, pushing the earth back deep within the mine. Nice going, kid, praised Naruto. Haru smiled softly as he walked towards the old man, and helped him get up by slinging an arm over his shoulder while Naruto did the same for the other arm. Unfortunately for them, the good deed would be paid in betrayal, as the same old man that they helped had ratted them out of Haru being an earthbender as he led a group of firebenders towards his house in the middle of the night. Haru, hearing someone knocking at the door, he goes to answer it, only to find a Fire Nation soldier waiting outside the house. That's him. That's the earthbender, confirmed the same old man whose life he had saved back at the mines, and without hesitation, the soldiers took the shocked teen into custody. Morning had arrived, and Naruto had woken up, sitting on the hay he used as a bed, for he still felt sleepy. Shaking it off, he stretched his limbs and put on his clothes and walked out of the shed as he continued to stretch his arms, till he noticed Haru's mother standing there, looking down the road, giving him a bad feeling for the way she just stood there. When she heard the doors of the shed opening up, she turned towards Naruto with tears rolling down her cheeks, confirming his fears. "What happened?" asked the blonde as the lady approached him, only to receive a slap across the face. "They took him. They took him, and it's all your fault," she shouted at him. "If you hadn't arrived, he wouldn't have been taken away." The mother collapsed to the ground, sobbing. Naruto just stood there, till he kneeled in front of her and placed his hand on her shoulder. "When did they took him?" he asked her. "They came around midnight when they took him away," she murmured. "Damn, they could have taken him anywhere by now," thought the blonde. Letting out a sigh, he placed both his hands on the mom's shoulder, causing her to look up at him. "Rest easy, I'll get your son back," he assured her. "How?" she asked. "I simply ask you to trust me. I will get your son back, I promise," he said before he got up and walked down the road, heading towards the village. "And I have the perfect way to find him," thought the blonde as he had a certain person in mind to have a confrontation with. Back at the village, the same tax collector that tried to take Naruto's sword away was walking around town with his soldiers, terrorizing the villagers as he collected the money from them, just as he was doing it to an elderly woman. "Sir, I gave you everything I had 2 days ago, the shop is all I got left," pleaded the old woman. "If you cannot pay the tax, then I'll just burn your shop to the ground," sneered the firebender as he threw her aside towards the ground while everyone just stood back and watched. "Men, dispose of this dump," he ordered his men, and they began to sprout fire out of their hands, but were swallowed whole as the earth opened underneath them. "What?" shouted the man, "who dares to interfere? You sure like to learn the hard way, don't you?" The tax collector and the townspeople looked to where the voice came from, and the firebender suddenly had a fearful look in his eyes as he recognized the man as he stood in an unusual earthbending stance. "You," muttered the man. Naruto stood in his praying mantis stance, and moved his balled fists forward twice before he opened them up and shot them forward once more, making the earth send a fissure towards the firebenders, sending them crashing towards the nearest stand as they groaned in pain when they landed. "Hold! You're under arrest." Then suddenly the blonde was surrounded by 5 Fire Nation soldiers as they pointed their spears at him. "Surrender and no harm shall befall you." "I give up," said the blonde without a second thought as he lazily put his arms up in the air with a bored look in his face, making the soldiers and the townspeople blink stupidly. Okay, arrest him and take him towards the ship," ordered the captain. While the soldiers tied his hands together and corded him with their spears still held at him towards the ship that resided at the port, they didn't notice the grin the blonde was holding. "Good, now all I have to do is wait," thought Naruto. Once Naruto boarded the ship, he noticed that he wasn't alone, for other earthbenders were also arrested, and like the people, they also held looks of hopelessness. Then, he felt the ship began to sail and walked towards the nearest window and saw that indeed, the ship had set course to who knows where. "One thing is certain, wherever I'm going, I'm bound to find the other earthbenders that the Fire Nation had taken prisoners," thought Naruto as he tried to get comfortable as much as possible. After a few hours of sailing on the sea, the blonde was rudely awakened by a soldier that shoved his spear on his gut. "Get up, we have arrived," said the soldier as he grabbed Naruto by scruff of the neck of the rags that were given for prisoners and was shoved ahead. "Start walking." The blonde began to walk with the rest of the captured earthbenders out of the ship as they walked up deck, only for the blonde to stop at the top of the stairs to check out the massive fortress made out of metal, but couldn't pies it further as he was shoved once again by one of the soldiers for holding up the line. "Quit gawking and keep walking," ordered the soldier, but Naruto complied with gritted teeth for the meantime, and walked down the plank and got in line with the rest of the benders as they awaited for the warden, who didn't fail to let his presence be known. "Earthbenders, it is my pleasure to welcome you aboard my mother shipyard." A middle-aged firebender walked their way with his hands behind his back, greeting them with a false smile on his face. "I am your warden, but I prefer to think of you not as my prisoners, but as my honored guests." "Honored guests my ass," scoffed the blonde in his mind. "And I hope you can come to think of me as your humbled and caring hosts," cynically said the warden as he walked in front of each of them. "You will succeed here if you simply cough. The sounds of coughing interrupted the warden, and he didn't seem to like that one bit as he turned around and blasted a small stream of fire at the feet of the earthbender that stood next to Naruto, making him jump back in fright. What kind of guest dishonors his host by interrupting him? Growled the warden as he glared at the sick earthbender. "Take him below. 1 week in solitary confinement will improve his manners." Naruto just watched helplessly as they took him away. "Simply treat me with the courtesy I give you and we will get along famously," snidely said the warden as he talked directly in the blonde's face, but Naruto simply glared at him from the corner of his eyes before he and the remaining earthbenders were instructed to walk towards the entrance of the rig, allowing them to get a full view as to what to expect in their surroundings. "You will notice, earthbenders, that this rig is made entirely out of metal. You're miles away from any rock or earth, so, if you have any illusions of employing that brutary savagery you pass down as bending among you people, it is impossible," exclaimed the warden as he looked at each and one of them directly in the eye while they stood in front of the entrance. "Good day." And so, the warden walked off, leaving the earthbenders to walk inside the prison. Once Naruto was inside, the metal gate came down as he looked around and saw many people living in misery, trying to survive for the next day, with hopes of one day to get out of here. The more he saw as he walked around, the sicker and angry he felt, but fortunately, he was interrupted by someone he was seeking. "Naruto?" asked the surprised Haru. Happy to seeing him well, the blonde just lazily waved at the teen with a big grin on his face. "What are you doing here? What does it look like?" "I came here to bail you out, since it is my fault you got stuck in this mess to begin with," explained the blonde as he scratched his chin with his eyes smiling. "And you got yourself arrested?" deadpanned the teen. "Since I didn't know where you were taken, letting myself get captured was the only way of finding you," said Naruto proudly, causing Haru to laugh. "You got guts, man, I'll give you that, but come, there's someone I want you to meet," said Haru as he led the blonde towards a group of middle-aged men sitting in a circle as they ate their food. "Naruto, this is my father, Tairo. Dad, this is Naruto," presented to one another. "It's an honor to meet you, sir," exclaimed Naruto, but got a bowl of food from Tairo. "Here, have some dinner, my boy," which Naruto gladly took, but grimaced once he saw what was inside the bowl. "This shit looks like someone just vomited in the bowl and passed it down," thought Naruto with his eyebrow twitching. "It's not as bad as it looks," lied the man, but not wanting to be rude, Naruto sat down and took a spoonful of whatever they were serving and put it in his mouth, but just as he had placed it inside, Naruto made gagging gestures as he forced down the food down his throat, causing Tairo to laugh. "It's still pretty bad though," exclaimed Tairo as he smiled kindly at the blonde before another prisoner came to him. "Tairo, the prisoners are complaining that there aren't enough blankets to go around. I'll talk to the guards, but for the meantime, make sure the elderly are taken care of first, while the rest of us will simply have to hold on," assured the man. "Sorry to interrupt, but I'm curious, how do you plan to escape this place?" asked the blonde to Tairo with a serious look in his face. "Excuse me? You know the plan to get the hell out of here along with everyone else. So what is it? Sabotage? Mutiny? The plan is simply to survive. Wait out this war and hope that someday we will be able to return to our homes and forget about this ever happened," said the old man tiredly. "You're kidding, right?" asked Naruto, with surprise clearly shown on his face. "Naruto, I admire your courage and envy your youth, but there are people's lives at stake and the warden is a ruthless man that won't stand for any kind of rebellion, Tyro explained to the blonde, slowly closing his eyes. I'm sorry, but we are powerless. Annoyed, the blonde simply got up and walked towards the air duct, standing on it as he whistled to get the attention of everyone in sight. Earthbenders, you will listen to me. Many of your villages had fallen to the Fire Nation, that is true, but those that cannot defend themselves still look up to you to lead and protect them, but what would they say if they were to see you now? Bunch of men and women who aren't worth for shit? No, they will see free men and women, they will see freedom. And what the enemy will see, they will see the fury in your eyes, and they will hear the cries of your roars and the stomps of your marches, for they will know what we can do, and with the Avatar on our side, there will be nothing that can stop us. By the sweat of our brow and the strength of our backs and the courage in our hearts. Earthbenders, stand up and fight for that you cherish the most. Encouraged Naruto, but was severely disappointed as no one took a step forward or simply ignored him. Watching from afar, the warden frowned upon the blonde as he saw the motives behind his speech and instructed a few of his men to go down there and subdue him, believing that down the road, he would become a thorn on his side, and decided to deal with it now before he managed to rile up some of the earthbenders. Dejectfully, Naruto got off the air vent and sat there, running his hands through his hair in frustration by the cowardice of the people, but he wouldn't concede till he ignites the fire that had vanished from their hearts. I need to find a way for them to help themselves, but how? This entire place is made out of metal and there's no earth around here, pondered the blonde, tracing the cold, metal ground with his hand until he looked up and saw the smoke coming out of the tower, realization coming to him, if there's smoke, they must be burning coal, so in other words. I found myself a source of earth, smirked the blonde till he heard footsteps coming and looked to the side to see a group of soldiers walking towards him with their weapons held tight in their hands, surrounding him completely once they reached him. How can I help you? Asked the blonde as H pretended to be ignorant. You're to come with us, ordered one of the soldiers, causing said blonde to raise an eyebrow. If they take me, I could use the element of surprise to sneak out of the prison and reach the coal without having to worry about being spotted, thought the blonde. Then putting out much of a fight, he extended both his arms out and let the soldier cuff his hands to be taken at the bottom part of the rig, where solitary confinement resided. Seeing his friend being taken away, Haru tried to go help him, but was detained by his father as he shook his head, making Haru to lower his head in sadness. At the lower parts of the rig, the sounds of a door being unlocked were heard till it was shot opened, with the blonde Avatar being shoved inside by the soldiers as he landed face first with the cuffs still placed on his wrists. Welcome to your new chambers, snidely remarked the man and closed the door as he laughed, leaving him as the sound of footsteps walking away sounded through the corridor. Inside his cell, Naruto sat cross-legged as he took a look around his surroundings, noticing the only ventilation or view to the outside world was a small window with bars. Meanwhile, with Aang and his friends, they kept going with their original plan of heading north to reach the northern tribes so Aang could learn waterbending, but at the same time, they couldn't help wonder how their blonde friend was doing, for even though they had met for a brief period of time, he left a lasting impression on them. Especially Katara, who kept practicing waterbending as how Naruto had instructed, and was coming along just fine, but wasn't enough to fight against any seasoned firebender. As they continued flying, the group spotted a large section of the forest missing from the mountains. Sokka cursed the Fire Nation for the destruction of the forest while Katara tried to cheer up and upset Aang, who felt guilty for being in animated hibernation for over a century, by giving him a lecture about how nature always finds a way to grow back to life. Later on, after meeting an old man from a nearby village, Aang finds himself in a small Earth Kingdom village that is being attacked by a monster from the spirit world. Him being the ridge between the two worlds, agreed to help them. On that night, this monster, named Heibai, caused rampage through the village and assaulted the Avatar, and Sokka, not being able to stand there watching his friend fighting the spirit alone, goes out to help but ends being captured by the angry spirit. Aang chases Heibai in order to save Sokka. Aang ends being knocked out as he accidentally ends up in the spirit world. Not knowing what to do since one could see him, he pleads for Avatar Roku to give him a sign, and a sign appeared in the form of a dragon as it descended towards Aang, landing in front of him. Realizing that the dragon was Roku's familiar, He mounts him and flies off to the Avatar temple in the Fire Nation as it flew into the chambers of where the statue of Avatar Roku resided. Within the chambers, the dragon shows him two visions, one of a comet and the second one of a shadowed figure that had strange markings on his body, glowing red along with his eyes, as if he were in the Avatar state. After he saw those visions, Aang asks how he can talk to Roku. The dragon simply shows him that in 3 days' time, the winter solstice will occur in the realm of the spirits and the living will unite, allowing him to talk to Roku. Knowing how to reach the previous, Aang tells the dragon to take him back to village to face the spirit. Once they arrive, Aang returns to the realm of the living and awakens in front of a wooden statue of a panda, realizing that spirit is the guardian of the forest. He realizes what he must do and how to calm the attacking beast. As the sun began to set, a worried Katara waited at the entrance of the village, and rejoices when she notices Aang gliding towards her. As he lands, Katara asks about her brother, but he shakes his head in failure but assures her that he knows to calm the angered spirit. As the sun had completely set, Bai appeared once again, but Aang stood firm blocking his path, saying how he understands his anger about his home being destroyed and proceeds as he pulls out an acorn and tells the spirit the same logic that Katara told him. The spirit, understanding Aang's explanation, turns back into his original form of a panda, and heads back towards the forest, releasing every person he had taken, including Sokka who was hugged by her sister, restoring peace to the village. Meanwhile, Iroh was on some hot springs that he had bumped into, taking a chance to relax. He gets captured by scouting earthbenders and is told by his capturers that he is going to be taken to Ba Sing Se to face justice, at the city that was said to have been laid on siege for 600 days by Iroh during his youth as a Fire Nation general, causing Zuko to stop his chase for the Avatar and to go save his uncle instead. After helping the village find their peace from the angered spirit, Aang tries to sneak away in the night in order to prevent Sokka and Katara from coming with him to Fire Nation territory in order to reach the Crescent Moon Island where the Avatar's temple resides, but Appa refuses and is caught by the siblings as they voiced his selfishness in leaving them, but Aang still refused to listen as he explained he couldn't guarantee their safety and he had to know the meaning of the message from Avatar Roku on the winter solstice, but in the end, Aang gave in and allowed the two to come along. However, during their travel towards the temple, Zuko was hot on their trail as he sought to bring down the Avatar as they headed to Fire Nation territory. Iroh tried to talk sense into his wayward nephew of the consequences it will lead to if he were to be captured, but Zuko retained firm on his chase at the Avatar, but neither group expected a blockade led by General Zhao, who ordered to attack both the Flying Bison and Prince's ship. Aang maneuvered successfully through the fire rocks that were launched as he managed to pass into Fire Nation territory, causing both Sokka and Katara to grow nervous. Unfortunately for Zuko, his ship wasn't as lucky as it got hit, but was allowed to go through since Zhao believed the prince himself would be a guide as to where the Avatar is headed. Once the group landed on the island, the group made their way towards the temple. Aang and the siblings cautiously trekked their way inside the temple, looking for the sages that were said to be the allies of the Avatar, but once the sages revealed themselves, they attack Aang as they try to prevent him from reaching Roku's chamber. But one of the sages, Shu, betrays his associates and declares himself loyal to the suspicious Avatar, but proves his loyalty as he helps them escape through a hidden passage. As they walk through the passage, Shu explains what had happened through the last 100 years, and how the sages were forced to aid the Fire Lord on his conquest, while Aang just lowers his head from the guilt he felt for abandoning the world. Just as they had reached the room where the entrance for Roku's sanctuary resides, they found the doors to be locked, and unable to open since it would take a fully pledged Avatar to do so. Sokka came up with an idea to create fake fire bending, but that plan failed. But Katara noticed the scorched marks and told them of her plan, and with Shu's help, the three managed to trick the remaining sages into opening the doors of the sanctuary that held Roku's statue. Zuko, however, spoiled their plot as he captures Aang and gives the sages enough time to recover and capture the intruders and traitor. Seeing what was happening, Aang wistfully outmaneuvers Zuko and runs towards the chamber as he jumped over the sages, successfully managing to enter as the doors closed with an ominous glow, illuminating them brightly as the doors were sealed shut as the prince and the sages found out when they tried to open the doors. Believing that Avatar Roku didn't want any interference whatsoever. Inside the chambers, Aang saw the light had halfway illuminated as it hit Roku's statue directly, but nothing had occurred, and waited till he got impatient as he started to pace around frantically in front of the statue of the previous avatar. "Why isn't nothing happening?" exclaimed a frustrated young avatar as he placed his hands on his head. "I don't know what I'm doing. All I know is airbending. Please Avatar Roku, talk to me." And so, till the light had completely engulfed the statue's eyes began to shine, smoke began to sprout out of nowhere as it surrounded him whole till it finally dissipated, revealing Avatar Roku, standing with a small smile on his face with his sights on his predecessor. "Good to see you, Aang," greeted the aged man with a small humorous smirk. "What took you so long?" Aang just simply bowed in respect. Meanwhile, outside the chamber. "Why did you help the avatar?" demanded Zuko, grabbing a handful of Shu's robe, but the sage wasn't intimidated at least one bit as he remained calm as he looked into the scarred prince's eyes. "Because it was once the sage's duty and it is still our duty." Then suddenly the sound of clapping was heard throughout the temple, as General Zhao had revealed himself in front of the group with a squad of fire-bending soldiers following him. What a moving and heartfelt performance. "I'm certain the Fire Lord will understand when you explain to him as to why you have betrayed him." Then he looked at the banished teen, and Prince Zuko. "It was a noble effort, but your little smokescreen didn't work," Zhao exclaimed arrogantly while a soldier apprehended Zuko, 2 traitors in one day. "The Fire Lord will be pleased." "You're too late, Zhao. The avatar's inside and the doors are sealed," Zuko retorted as he struggled to get free. Scoffing, the general paid no heed as he looked at the door. "No matter, sooner or later he has to come out, and then he will pay for the trouble he caused me at the South Pole." Hearing that the Fire Nation had invaded their village once more, Sokka growled in hate. "What did you do to our village?" Zhao saw the Water Tribe siblings and walked towards them, standing in front of them arrogantly with a frown on his face. "You peasants must be from the South Pole, but don't worry, your village is still intact, for the Avatar made sure of that as he eradicated the fleet I had sent to retrieve and capture him." He growled his explanation, causing the teens to become confused at the man's claim. "Aang would never kill, even if it was the foulest of firebenders," exclaimed Katara. "Either way, little girl, he is still a threat to the Fire Nation, and as such he will be handled accordingly," said Zhao as he walked back towards the door. Back inside the chamber, Roku gained a serious look in his eyes as he addressed the young airbender. "Aang, I have something very important to tell you. That is why, when you were in the spirit world, I sent my dragon to come get you," explained the aged avatar. "Is it about my visions? About the comet and the man with the glowing markings?" asked Aang, receiving an affirmative nod. "What do they mean?" "I'll explain in a bit about him, but first, you must listen for what I'm about to tell you," told Roku. 100 years ago, Fire Lord Sozin used that comet to begin the war. He and his fire-bending army harnessed its incredible power and dealt a deadly first strike against the other nations. "So the comet made them stronger?" asked a nervous Aang. Nodding his head, Roku continued his explanation, to a level you could not even imagine. "But that happened 100 years ago," muttered the young airbender. "What does the comet have to do with the war now?" "Listen carefully, Sozin's comet will return by the end of this fall, and Fire Lord Ozai will use his incredible power to finish the war once and for all," warned Roku. "If he succeeds, even the Avatar won't be able to restore balance to the world. Aang, you must defeat the Fire Lord before the comet arrives." Frustrated even more, Aang almost shouted at Roku, "But I haven't even started to learn water bending, not to mention earth and fire." "Mastering the elements takes years of practice and discipline," said the previous avatar with a stern look, causing Aang to flinch a bit. "But if the world is to survive, you must do it by summer's end." "But what about this person of my visions, how does he fit in all of this?" "Aang, the person from your vision is a man whose power overshadows all of the avatars combined," revealed Roku, causing Aang's eyes to widen in shock. "He is an avatar of ancient times that appeared out of the chaos of battles past, and brought a golden era of peace. He was the first to ever bend the elements as well, and through him, the art of bending was brought to life as he passed down his knowledge to his students. His real name was forgotten by tides of time, but the title given to him was known throughout the ages. He is known as the Avatar of 4 Dragons, finished Roku, shocking the young airbender even further till he gained a sour look on his face. Isn't he a myth? And if he's alive, why didn't he do something about the war? Demanded Aang, while Roku just stayed quiet. Back outside, Zhao stood in the middle of the triangular formation, surrounding the entrance to prevent any form of escaping. When those doors open, I want every one of you to unleash all of your fire power, ordered the general. How is Aang going to make it out of this, mused Katara to her brother, but received no response as she saw the serious pensive look in his eyes. What's wrong? I'm bothered. He says that the Avatar killed all those men back at the village, but Aang was with us the whole time, explained Sokka. You can't possibly be saying that there could be two Avatars, are you? Asked an incredulous Katara. I don't know, but I plan to find out once when we get out of here. Then he looked at the squad of firebenders, that is if we manage to make it out of this. Back with Roku, Aang was still feeling unconfident about himself. Even if I meet him and ask him to teach me the elements, I don't think I'll be able to master the elements in time. What if I fail? Ranted the bald kid, but Roku just gave a warm, confident smile. He cannot train you for he has his own destiny to fulfill, but I have confidence in you, for I know you can do it. Aang, for you have done once before, said Roku, causing Aang to smile. The solstice is ending, it's time we part our ways, for now. But I won't be able to return to the temple. What if I have questions? How will I talk to you? Exclaimed Aang. I'm a part of you. When you need to talk to me, you will find a way, responded Roku. Then he closed his eyes, sensing what awaited him on the other side. A great danger awaits you at the temple. I can help you face the threat, but only if you're ready. While he had his eyes closed, Aang's tattoos began to glow their blue hue. Once he opened them up, his eyes too were glowing and spoke with a voice of many. I'm ready. And the smoke once again began to lift around them, engulfing both of them as Aang went back to the realm of the living, but not before Roku heed a final warning. Aang, beware of the man with the crimson eyes with black tomos in them. Back outside the chamber, the doors began to glow once again as smoke passed through underneath the doors, captivating everyone's eyes as the doors began to open, and the glow intensified. However, Zhao wasn't affected as he stared into the glowing eyes of the Avatar with a thought in his mind. This isn't the Avatar, thought Zhao, but either way, he was still going to eliminate the threat. Ready? No. Aang! Shouted Katara as she and her brother tried to break away from the chains. Fire! Shouted the general as he and his squad launched simultaneously fire blasts at the entrance, engulfing it completely as it created a large sphere of fire, but it parted in half as it revealed a manifestation of Avatar Roku waving one of his hands up and the other down, scaring and awing everyone present. Avatar Roku, muttered Shu. And the Avatar sucked the fire within his hands, then extended them forward as it released a massive wave of fire, releasing Aang's friend and the prince himself, who made a run for it when the chains were melted by the heat. The sages fled when they saw Avatar Roku turning towards them with a glare, and suddenly, brought his hand up and made a chopping movement, parting the ground with the extreme heat he radiated, and with the same hand, he made a cupping motion as he slightly brought his hand up, causing the lava to gush like a raging volcano. Avatar Roku is going to destroy the temple, we have to get out of here, said Shu. Katara turned to him, not without Aang. Believing he did enough to bring the temple down, Roku took a deep breath and exhaled it while he brought his hands down. Inside the chamber, the light that illuminated the Avatar's statue had moved on past the statue, causing the fog to be sucked in as it engulfed Roku, leaving behind a disoriented Aang as he fell to his knees only to be helped up by the siblings. Thanks. But they couldn't stay any longer as the temple was crumbling down due to the lava rising, blocking any path down the tower. Aang, hearing chattering coming from the outside, he looks up to see Momo guiding Appa towards them as he stopped midair next to the edge of the roof, allowing them to jump into the saddle and flew off into the distance into the setting sun, leaving a very pissed off Zhao, who didn't manage to catch either the Avatar or the banished prince. A week had passed by since he was thrown into the solitaire, and it was hell since it was too quiet, that is until the guards came and dropped his food once a day. Although, while he was imprisoned, he used Kagi Bunshin and henged them into mice to scout the rig in order to find the fastest route to reach the coal while trying to find the path that was less watched. Feeling sore from sitting on the floor for so long, he got up and walked towards the window when he noticed that sun was close to settling down completely, dusk beginning to come. Suddenly, he turned towards the door as he heard chattering coming down the corridor and went to the door, trying to find out what they were talking about as he placed his ear on the door and had a clear hearing as to what they were saying. Did you hear? About what? General Zhao got promoted by the Fire Lord himself, he got promoted to Admiral. Really? Lucky man. Yes he is, and he already sent his first order as Admiral, to use the Yuyan archers to capture the Avatar. Damn. That's extreme, not even the Avatar will be able to handle the archers. They are considered the best of the best in the Fire Nation. Yeah he won't. Said the soldier as they turned around the corner, not knowing they had just warned a certain prisoner of the Avatar's trap. Shit. Aang's going to be in trouble, I have to get out of here, thought Naruto as he backed away from the door and took a deep breath, raised his hands in the air and waved them in a circle while they were still in the air. And a drop of water began to form in the air as he mixed the elements in the atmosphere to make water till he had water sphere in the size of a giant bowl. He then placed his cuffed hands into the sphere and concentrated to turn the water into ice, freezing them so he could break the cuffs with ease. Rubbing the soreness of his wrists he gained from the cuffs, Naruto then turned towards the door and launched his massive flames towards while he waved his hand once more to create another water sphere as the metal door turned cherry red from the extreme heat. Once it was heated enough, the blonde threw the water balloon at the door and a loud hiss was heard as the door cracked all over as it cooled off, and Naruto threw a hard punch, breaking the door to pieces as they crumbled to the floor. Peeking his head out of his prison, Naruto looked both sides before he dashed out of his cell and made way towards the furnace where the coal was located. Nightfall had fallen, and the warden was no happy of the news his guards had brought him. Escape? What do you mean he has escaped? Growled the warden at his guards, you better have a good explanation as to how he escaped, Captain. We don't know for certain, sir, mumbled the captain his explanation. When we got there, the door for his cell was destroyed, as if shattered to pieces. Not satisfied with the answer, the warden without warning just grabbed the captain by the scruff of his outfit and threw him off the rig into the water, causing a loud splash to be heard. Turning towards the other soldier with an icy glare, he gave out his command. I want him captured alive. So I can teach him some manners myself. The soldier simply saluted his higher in command and marched off to gather more people for the search for the blonde all over the premises. Morning had risen, and the guards spent all night looking for the blonde, but had no such luck for he could not be found anywhere, but they were persistent on the search for him. Tyro and Haru, along with the rest of the captured earthbenders, looked around in confusion as to what was going on, since the guards came into their camps and ordered them to step outside, believing that they were hiding him, but nothing. The earthbenders had gathered near one of the air ducts that connected to the furnace, getting out of the way of the soldiers, till suddenly, Haru and some of the earthbender nearby began to feel currents of air coming out of the ventilation. Slowly backing away, they noticed that some black debris was coming out till it exploded. Large amounts of coal were being chunked out of the vent, causing many to get confused, till Naruto himself jumped out of the vent, landing on top of the coal, coughing and patting his clothes to get rid of the stains made by the coal. There he is. Surround him. Naruto looked up to see that he was surrounded from all angles, with the warden walking towards him with his own little squad of firebenders. You truly are pushing your luck, boy, you're one mistake away from me ordering your death warrant, growled/warned the warden. Naruto. Stop this foolishness. Shouted Tyro, hoping to save the blonde from the warden's wrath, but was surprised when Naruto looked back at him with a grin on his face. Earthbenders. This is your chance to stand up and grab a hold of your fate. This is your chance to stand up and fight for what you believe in. This is your chance to fight for freedom. Shouted Naruto with enthusiasm as he pointed to the coal with his spread arms, but once again, the earthbenders turned a blind eye at the blonde, causing the warden to laugh coldly at Naruto's attempts of igniting their courage. Foolish boy, do you really believe that a few chunks of coal and encouragement speeches would ignite these people? Sneered the warden as he watched Naruto lower his arms to his side with his head lowering down. Take a good look at these people, their spirits were broken a long time ago, you failed. finalized the warden before he turned around and slowly. Udon whispered Naruto as his mind flashed the face of his student. Flashback. A younger Udon was seen on the training field, training despite having bandages wrapped around his head as they covered his eyes, trying to use his chakra to see as he expanded it around the field, but was failing miserably as he dropped to his knees in exhaustion. Angry, he punched the ground hard enough to make a spider web on the ground as he cried for his cursed disability. If you keep pushing yourself like that, you're bound to end up in the hospital again. Who's there? Shouted the teen, as he reached for a kunai, but was just aimlessly pointed the weapon, afraid of who the stranger was, but a hand gently found itself on his shoulder. Relax Udon, it's me, Naruto, I heard what happened, and I would like to help regain your sight, said the blonde avatar, but his hand was swatted away when Udon jumped away from him. How can I regain my sight when that bastard Uchiha damaged my eyes beyond repair? Even Tsunade-sama said so herself. Shouted Udon with tears falling freely underneath the bandages, but Naruto just kept quiet as he let the teen cry out all of his anger and despair, but he wasn't giving up on him. Listen carefully to what I'm about to explain. You've already heard I have taken both your teammates along with Inari as students in order to teach them each one of the 4 styles I have created, correct? And got a nod in return. Well, I want you to be the 4th student to gain the knowledge of earthbending, said Naruto, shocking the blind teen as he didn't expect this from him, but still had his doubts. But why me? I can no longer see, I can no longer be a shinobi, I'm useless. Exclaimed Udon, as he tore off his bandages, revealing 2 unfocused, milky eyes at him, but Naruto simply placed his hands on both his shoulders. Udon, what I'm offering you is a chance is not just for you to learn earthbending, but also a way to gain your sight back, for through earthbending, you will be able to see by feeling the vibrations from the ground to a degree that it's going to make a veteran sensory type Nin look like a novice, clarified the blonde. Allowing what he said to sink in as Udon just threw his arms around Naruto, crying as he thanked him, and all the blonde could do was pat him on the back. Alright now, dry them tears and let's get you started on your training, alright? Said Naruto as he stood up and watched Udon wipe his tears away and looked at Naruto with a big smile on his face. I promise you, Naruto-sensei, I will train hard to make you proud. End of flashback. For when we're gone, your teachings won't fade away, for I will make sure every future earthbender under me become recognized for their strong will. Was this it? Muttered the blonde a little louder, causing the attention of those who managed to hear it, the warden being one of them. Was this the vision of the mighty earthbenders that my student visualized long ago? Shouted the blonde in rage, shocking some of them as he continued, you dare call yourself earthbenders when you cower and spit on the teachings I taught the earth sage many centuries ago. I have had enough of you, soldiers, kill him. Ordered the warden as he shot large flames from his fists, heading straight at the blonde. Naruto! Look out! Warned Haru, but all the blonde did was lazily raise his hand up and put out the flames with the back of his hand, shocking the warden and everyone else. Who the hell are you? Demanded the warden, but almost pissed himself when he saw the eyes of the blonde when he turned to look at him. Eyes red as blood looking at him directly as he now had taken notice of the extra features his prisoner had gained. Tyro saw the strange tattoos that had appeared out of nowhere with a crimson glow on the blonde's body and easily recognized as to who Naruto truly was. So the stories are true. Whispered the man with Haru turning at him as he had heard what his that had said. Dad, what stories? What are you talking about? When I was young lad, my father used to tell me a story of an avatar that radiated a crimson glow whenever he used his true power. At first, I thought it was just a myth, but seeing him standing there with those glowing marking, I know now that the legend itself is real, replied Tyro with seriousness plastered on his face, causing Haru to grow even more confused. Dad, who is he? Haru, he is the one responsible for bringing water, earth, fire and air bending to the world, he's the Crimson Avatar. Having heard what the prisoner had said, the warden stared in disbelief at the blonde, not believing what he just had heard. Him. The famed Crimson Avatar. That legend is nothing but a farce and I'll prove it by killing this imposter. Shouted the warden as he stepped forward and bent his body to the side, shooting both fists out as he launched a massive torrent of fire at the blonde. But this time Naruto jumped off the coal and landed on the steeled floor as he waved his arms around in a giant circle while twisting his body and made water appear out of nowhere, making it circle him as he extended one hand forward and one backward, both with open palms as he glared at the captain. "Everyone, fire at will!" shouted the warden as he launched another assault, but this time other firebenders joined in. Naruto simply twisted his whole body backward as he took a step back and made the water sphere around him disappear and jumped in the air with a spinning kick, launching a giant firewall towards the warden's squad, destroying the embers that were coming at him, but noticing the risks they were in. Everyone jumped out of the way as the firewall hit the steeled wall and left a massive scorched mark with some of it still burning red. Haru noticed that some of the soldiers with spears tried to sneak attack Naruto from behind, but he bended the coal to shoot out at them, knocking them out. One firebender saw what happened and sent Haru a flame shot, not having enough time to make a wall to protect himself. He lifted his arms to block it, but then a wall out of wall rose up and protected Haru as the fire hit the wall. Looking back, he saw his dad had taken action as he stood in his earth form with both arms slightly raised up. "Show them no mercy!" shouted the warden as he once shot fire shots towards the earthbenders, but more earthbenders joined Tyro into fighting back as they made wall and blocked the fire as they maintained the wall. "For the Earth Kingdom!" shouted Tyro with a push of the hands towards the ground, sending they dispersed the wall and sent the coal flying straight at the firebenders while the rest of the earthbenders' courage ignited and fought back with ferocity. Meanwhile Naruto was fighting off a horde of firebenders that come into the battlefield, blocking or waving away the fire shots, but they kept coming, so the blonde made water appear and turned it into a ring around him, blocking any other fire shots that were thrown at him. Then he got into his octopus stance and made the water grow tentacles like an octopus, and shot his hands forward and waved them to the side, making the tentacles strike and swatting them some of the firebenders away hard as they landed against the wall, and some didn't seem to get up for they were either out cold or severely in pain. Naruto. Hearing his name being called, the blonde Avtar saw that the earthbenders were huddled up, surrendered as now soldiers held their spears at them, while firebenders were able to outmatch the weakened earthbenders. Jumping into the air, Naruto landed in front of the earthbenders by slamming his fists onto the steel, making a gust of wind to blow them away, slowly rising to his feet. "Glad you finally found your courage," remarked the blonde. "You reminded us of what a true earthbender should be," remarked Tyro back as he stood side to side with the blonde. "They have us surrounded." Naruto simply smirked while he bore his crimson eyes at the fire army that had gotten up and resumed to cornering them, with the warden leading the pack. "Give up now, and I assure you, your punishment won't be as severe," sneered the warden with a glare. "Tyro," called out Naruto, "you want to see the full extension of earthbending?" Tyro simply looked at the blonde, skeptical at his claim, but the smirk he held on his face didn't seem to falter. "What do you mean?" asked the old man. At this question, Naruto's smirk grew even bigger. "Just watch." And so, the blonde reached down towards the floor and dug his fingers into the metal, and with a mighty pull, Naruto tore the metal of the floor and made a whip-like movement, causing every fire soldier to be thrown off. Tyro and the rest of the earthbenders could not believe what they were seeing. "N. He's bending the metal," muttered Haru in surprise as he saw the blonde once again whip the metal against the metal gates, completely breaking them off their confines, giving the earthbenders a chance to escape. "Go! Get out of here while I hold them off!" shouted the crimson Avtar before he twisted his body and sent chunk of metal flying towards the firebenders, blocking the shots of fire they had sent to impede their escape. "Don't let them escape!" shouted the warden. Naruto, seeing the warden was being resilient, he bended the coal in front him with his fists in front of him, then shot them forward with his fingers pointing forward, making the coal shoot at the warden and his squad, hitting them on as they were unable to deflect some of the rocks that managed to pass through their defensives and went down groaning in pain. The warden noticed the coal he was laying on top began to move, dragging him airborne along with the rest of the firebenders as they floated away from the rig atop of the water, and turned towards the rig, noticing the earthbenders were holding him up while Naruto just looked at him. "Please, I cannot swim," pleaded the warden. "Don't worry, I hear cowards can swim," replied Tyro as he was just about to let them drop, but was stopped by the Avatar when he held his hand outward, his markings disappearing with his features going back to normal. "I'll make you a deal, I'll let you go if you tell me where the Yuyen archers are located," said the blonde, shocking Tyro and some of the earthbenders that stayed behind. "You're not serious, are you, Naruto?" asked Haru, but was ignored. I'll tell. The base of the Yuyen archers is located up north, crossing the river close to the mountains," said the warden without a beat. Naruto turned towards Tyro. "Alright, let him go." "Boo, but you said you were going to let me go," squeaked out the warden. Naruto just gave him a cheeky grin. "I did keep my promise, but you failed to set the terms as to where I was to put you down." Smirking, the elder earthbender placed his opened hands down in front of him as he stood tall, allowing the coal to drop freely along with the warden as a loud splash was heard. After they had gained their freedom, Naruto, Tyro and Haru stood at the port of the ship, with every earthbender that was captured at deck. "Naruto, we are eternally grateful for what you have done for us," said Haru's father with a small bow. Scratching the back of his head embarrassedly, he said modestly, "I didn't do much, all I did was supply the coal for you guys to fight back." "You did more than that, Naruto. With our freedom, you brought broken families together, and most important of all, you helped us regain back what we lost," countered Tyro. "We promise to never again disgrace the teachings that you brought us, Avatar Naruto." Then he, along with everyone else, dropped to their knees and bowed their heads to the floor in sign of respect towards Naruto, who just stood there, not knowing what to say, for he didn't had this such level of respect in the past when he was still living in Konoha, despite all the accomplishments he had achieved. Kneeling to one knee at Tyro, he placed his hand on his shoulder, causing the man to look up into the eyes of the Avatar, before he rose his head up and looked at each person that bowed before him. "Earthbenders rise, don't bow before me, for I'm no different, I'm human like the rest of you, I'm your equal just as all of you are my equal," spoke Naruto loudly for everyone to hear him, but Tyro just kept staring at him, hearing the sincerity of his words. "He truly is just as the tales say," thought the man before he was lifted to his feet by said person. "Go to your wife, old man, she's waiting for you and your son's return," said Naruto. "You should come with us, Naruto," suggested Haru, but the blonde slowly shook his head. "You guys have your mission, to liberate every village that was confiscated by the Fire Nation, and mine is to help the current Avatar to bring back balance to the world," replied Naruto before he jumped over the wall and looked back once more. "Till we cross paths again, stay safe and never let the fire within you die out," Naruto said lastly before he jumped off into the water, landing on top of it as he used his chakra to keep himself afloat and began to use his wind affinity to boost up his speed to run north, with his next destination in mind. Leaving behind the people he had helped regain their courage to go back to their families and protect that what is precious to them. Tyro then turned towards the other earthbenders and shouted on top of his lungs, "Let's go back to our homes and make the Fire Nation rue the day they ever stepped foot in our kingdom." And a loud roar of approval was heard throughout the rig. During the week that Naruto had spent time in solitary confinement, a couple of things had happened to the group after their trip at the Fire Temple. First, they had a run-in with a band of guerrilla fighters that was led by a young, wayward teen named Jet while he was rescuing them after they had walked in a small camp occupied by Fire Nation soldiers, thanks to Sokka as he suggested to walk due to his instincts. Both Aang and Katara were amazed by the skill that Jet showed as he battled the firebenders, while Sokka simply scoffed, reminding them when their asses were saved by a certain blonde, but Katara countered by saying there is no comparison between pirates and Fire Nation soldiers. But Sokka simply agreed with her before he shut her up by reminding her that Naruto didn't had helped to fight them off while Jet had his gorilla to help him. While the siblings were arguing with each other, Jet makes the soldiers run defeat and invites the team back to the Freedom Fighters' hideout. At the hideout, they learned that every Freedom Fighter was a victim of every Fire Nation raid and Jet started the group in order to fend off every Fire Nation soldier that came across them. Later on, Jet invites them inside his headquarters, where the group plots out its attacks against the nearest village, but while the plan was being discussed, Sokka has his suspicions about Jet. Noticing this, Jet tempts Sokka by inviting him to partake in their missions. However, his plan fails as they jump a defenseless old man, making Sokka more skeptical of Jet's motives. Once the group came back to the hideout, Jet talks to Aang and Katara privately and asks them for their help, telling them that with their water bending, the plan could go without a hitch. Making Aang and Katara decide to help Jet save a nearby Earth Kingdom town, without knowing that Jet's real intent is to drown the village, willing to sacrifice the lives of innocent civilians to destroy the Fire Nation garrison there. Meanwhile, Sokka was left behind to be watched, believing that he would try to sabotage them, but finds out what Jet's real plan was and manages to escape his watchers, heading towards the village to warn them about the oncoming danger, but the villagers don't believe him, but the same old man that Sokka had saved him from Jet's grudge helps him convince the villagers and manages to evacuate the city, earth and fire alike, in time to avoid the flooding of the village. Then, the gang stumbles into the Great Divide, the world's largest canyon, where once again, the siblings start their bickering, giving Aang the chance to put his avatar skills to the test, to which he successfully solves their minor disputes, but the young avatar bites more than he could chew as he tried to put his skills to practical use. On a larger scale, when two Earth Kingdom tribes, who have been in a feud for 100 years, need to cross the canyon together. Getting aggravated, Aang explodes by saying they were going to travel together while Appa flies across the canyon with most needy people of the two tribes, and, with the help of a knowledgeable earthbender, guides the rest across the vast, dry landscape as they try to survive the creatures that resided on the canyon. In the end, Aang is able to end the feud, and the two tribes travel together to the capital city of Ba Sing Se. After that adventure, the group was in need of money, so Sokka decides to get a job due to the two's complaining and finds one where he helps out a fisherman who is willing to pay him to help him on his next fishing trip, even though he and the fisherman ignore the warnings of a storm brewing in the horizon. Then the fisherman recognizes Aang as the Avatar by the markings on his head and dubs him as the Avatar who turned his back on the world. Aang, remembering his dream, runs away in guilt. Katara goes after him and manages to track him down inside a cave where he sat, sulking in front of a fire, where Aang reveals to Katara that the monks at the Southern Air Temple told him he was the Avatar and wanted to send him away to the Eastern Air Temple to separate him from Monk Gyatso. Believing he was being too soft on Aang as he was the only person who cared about Aang as a person instead of as the Avatar, thus leading Aang to run away from home into a storm and, eventually, seal himself in the iceberg. Meanwhile on Zuko's ship, Zuko's own crew begin to question his leadership when he dismisses the safety of his own crew when they were told of the oncoming storm, until Iroh enlightens them on how the prince was scarred in a duel against the Fire Lord in an Agni Kai by his refusal to fight back, which led to his banished from the Fire Nation by his own father. And lastly, Sokka suffers from an illness due to his exposure to the elements during the storm. Katara becomes his caretaker but also begins to contract the illness as well. Aang informs her of a nearby herbalist institute and goes there in hopes of finding a cure for his friends. The herbalist tells him to get frozen frogs in order to suck on them, and goes in search for the frogs, but on his way to collect them, Aang has encounter with a group of Fire Nation Yuan archers, with orders appointed by the newly promoted Admiral Zhao to capture him, but Aang puts up a fight while they chase him, but gets captured in the end and taken to their base. Unknown to them, a certain masked figure had infiltrated the base and helped the Avatar escape his confines, but Admiral Zhao found out quick, setting off the alarms of an escape. The masked figure and Aang joined forces to fight in order to escape, but they were too many and soon they found themselves surrounded. Thankfully, a certain blonde decided to join in the fray. Aang and his masked savior had managed to escape the first wall, but before Aang had a chance to use the second ladder as a springboard to catapult themselves over the second wall, a firebender had ignited the ladder and burned it to the ground, leaving the masked figure to barely a grip at the edge of the wall. But he wasn't successful at hanging on and both of them fell down to the ground, quickly getting surrounded by a small squad of firebenders who rapidly shot their flames at them. Aang jumped in front and created whirlwind-like shield to protect them from the fire, till their higher-up arrived. "Stop! The Avatar must be captured alive!" shouted Zhao as walked with the general of the base, soon regretting his words for the masked figure brought his swords up to Aang's neck, the threat clearly being made, as both, Admiral Zhao and the masked fighter stared off at one another. However, their staring contest was put to a halt when there was commotion coming from the first gate. The sound of metal being sliced and crumbling down was heard, followed by the sound of soldiers grunting and shouting as they fought, along with the sound of fire being used by the firebenders. But what was followed after that wasn't really expected. The sound of a sword slicing through the air was heard by a barely audible hiss before the cries of pain and bones breaking echoed throughout the walls, scaring some of the soldiers that had surrounded the Avatar and the masked rebel. The cries continued to wail along with the sound of bones breaking, till it finally everything had died, leaving an eerie silence, causing everyone on the other side of the doors to prepare in case the intruder decided to bust through the door. Then, a thin line was seen cutting through the steel diagonally with another one cutting through the opposite side, forming an X pattern till someone had smashed through the gate, making a dust cloud rise as the pieces of metal were sent flying at the soldiers, making the admiral and everyone else scatter in hopes of not being flattened. The masked figure dropped one sword from Aang's neck in order to block the coming sword strike that came through the dust clouds. Clang! When the dust cleared, the masked rebel and along everyone else saw a tall man with an black outfit that seemed to be native to the Earth Kingdom, wearing what seemed to a black straw hat that covered half of his upper face, since none could see the features of his face except the lower jaw. The person barely lifted his head up, giving the blue spirit a glimpse of his eyes, revealing cold blue eyes glaring at him with controlled anger. "Let him go now," growled the blonde, but the masked swordsman had let go of Aang and barely managed to push off the blonde as he tried a swipe at him with his left sword so he could follow up with his right, however. Naruto got a hold of onto his left arm and blocked the second sword strike by placing his reversed blade behind him, and without missing a beat, Naruto rammed his shoulder into the blue spirit's midsection, making him stumble back a bit but allowing Naruto to gain enough time to turn the blade around and bringing it down with the intent of cutting his head off. "Naruto! Stop!" shouted Aang when he saw what the blonde was about to do, and the sword came to a stop just a few inches away from the mask. The blonde simply looked at the Avatar, waiting for an explanation. "He helped me escape. Please, don't kill him," pleaded Aang, using Naruto to recede back his sword looking at the masked rebel. "He sure has a funny way of helping you escape," commented the blonde with a glare towards the masked swordsman. "You're all completely surrounded, I suggest for you all to surrender peacefully, and your punishment won't be as severe," boasted Admiral Zhao with a sneer as he neared at them, with his little army hoisting either their spears or their fists back, ready to strike. "You sure always manage to get yourself in tight situations, don't you, Aang?" commented Naruto dryly, while Aang just laughed nervously as he scratched his head and the blue spirit quickly got to his feet with his broadswords up, ready to fight. Naruto then turned towards the admiral with an expressionless face. "If you value the lives of your soldiers, I suggest that you stand aside and let us pass," suggested the blonde as he gripped his sword tightly by the handle and placed it beside his waist. "I think you don't understand the situation you're in. You are in no position to make any demands whatsoever," arrogantly remarked the admiral, making Naruto to narrow his eyes dangerously as he flipped the sword once again, ready to strike with the blade. "Aang!" whispered the blonde, trying to get the Avatar's attention, "I want you and the masked guy to make a run for it. I'll hold them off while you two make your escape." "But Naruto, you can't handle them all at once, they are not pirates," said Aang, not liking the fact him having to leave his friend behind once again, but Naruto simply turned towards him with a grin. "Don't worry about me, I'm too stubborn to be killed," commented the blonde. "Now hurry, we can't afford them to capture you again. I'll meet you and the rest at the North Pole, now go." Then Naruto rushed at the Fire Nation soldiers without a sound, leaving Aang and the masked swordsman behind as they too began to run towards the exit that the blonde had made, but before they crossed the gates, Aang stopped to look back at Naruto's retreating form as he went and charged, and with sadness in his heart. He turned and ran as fast as he could through the gates. "Don't let them escape!" shouted Zhao, and the army mobilized after them. However, they were stopped by a certain blonde Avatar. Naruto went up to the first soldier and drew his sword, slashing the man from the waist up across the chest towards his shoulder, causing blood to shoot out everywhere, but he didn't stop there for side-stepped to the right to dodge a spear thrust and brought the blade down once the man was within range, killing him by almost beheading him, and twisted his body to thrust his blade forward towards a nearby firebender that was ready to strike him with a flame kick, stabbing him through the chest and kicked him hard to send him crashing towards the rest of the firebenders as they fell to the ground. Turning towards his left, the blonde slashed through the wooden stick as a soldier tried to block the coming strike, but it was futile as it found its mark on his collarbone, digging deeply into his flesh. Then brought his sword down and used its momentum to make a spin and slashed another soldier across the abdomen as the soldier gurgled as he fell to the floor, but then he was grabbed by the neck of his armor as Naruto threw him towards barrage of fire blasts made by firebenders, causing a mild explosion on impact. Then, without turning around, the blonde stabbed his sword back, embedding it into someone's gut. Elbowing the impaled person hard in the face, he managed to get his blade free as he brought it up in the air and made a downward slash, cutting another soldier in the middle while he stood motionless till he fell to the ground lifeless. Hearing a whistling sound, the blonde did a double back flip jump towards the exit he made, dodging the arrows that were aimed at him. Looking up, he saw one of the archers with a leather strap belt coming down on him with his arrow ready to fire, but then he noticed what kind of weapon the archer had on his belt. Kunais, thought Naruto. The archer shot his arrow but Naruto could see it coming, but knew it was a distraction for he could hear several arrows coming straight at him, so he jumped airborne straight at the archer, who tried to use his bow as a weapon, but Naruto blocked it with his bare hand as he held onto it and with the butt of his blade broke the skull when it came into contact with the head, making the archer land with a loud thud on the ground while Naruto held the belt with the kunais and placed over his head onto his shoulder, making go across his chest. Looking up ahead, he saw that every Fire Nation soldier was charging at him, and even he knew that he could not take on such numbers, so he made a run for it towards the first gate, making them follow him. Until he heard the sound of an arrow soaring through as it whistled in the air and looked up ahead in horror as he saw what the target for the arrow was. "Aang! Get out of the way!" shouted Naruto on top of his lungs. Moments before the arrow was shot, Admiral Zhao saw how one single person killed without difficulty a small platoon of firebenders and soldiers alike, but his real concern wasn't him. No, his main concern was the prisoner that had escaped from his cell, watching from his tower as the Avatar continued to flee from the base. Without turning to his left, he spoke with a cold voice. "Do you have a clear vision?" asked the Admiral to a Yu Yen archer that stood next to him with his arrow ready to fire. "Kill him, he is too much of a wild card to be left alive," ordered Zhao without taking his eyes off of the Avatar. Narrowing his eyes further, he continued, "And be ready to apprehend the two intruders, they will suffer a fate far worse." And following his orders, the archer let go of the arrow, letting it soar through the air towards its target. "Aang! Get out of the way!" Hearing his name being shouted, Aang turned around only to see a shiny object descending quickly towards him, only to stay rooted on the spot from fear when he saw that it was an arrow coming straight at him, but miraculously, the young airbender gasped when the blue spirit got in the way of the arrow and took the hit as it nailed him in the head, sending crashing back on the ground with his mask lightly tilted off his face. Noting that he wasn't getting up, Aang used his airbending to make a dust cloud to cover their escape, but curiosity got the better of him as he went and reached for the mask, only to gasp in shock as he scooted back when he saw Zuko's face. Quickly he got up and ready to flee, but his conscience stopped him as he couldn't not be cruel to leave him, and so, hoisting one of the prince's arms over his shoulder, Aang sprinted off into the distance. Naruto let out a sigh of relief when he watched as the masked swordsman intercepted the arrow and took the hit for Aang, then later for said person to create a cover for them to flee. Sensing they were no longer around in the area, the blonde turned towards to the charging soldiers and slowly sheathed his sword, placing it under the sash so he could reach for two of the kunais he had taken from the archer and reared his arms back so he could throw them hard enough for them to gain enough speed. Placing one of his hands with a hand sign, he called out his technique. Tajuu Shuriken Ka Gi Bunshin no Jutsu. And the two kunais that were thrown off had become over 2,000 kunais, and the soldiers watched in horror as the projectiles came until they hit their mark. Screams of horror were heard through the base as Zhao just watched while gripping hard on the rail as his soldiers were slaughtered by this demon, only to gasp in shock when the blonde took off his hat and revealed his golden hair, flowing freely with the breeze, looking straight at him with blue piercing eyes and lines on each side of his cheeks. "It's him," thought Zhao with slight fear as he recognized the man from the reports from the South Pole, only to watch Naruto disappear via Shunshin. Deep in the forest, far away from the fortress, Zuko was resting in a bed made out of leaves while Aang watched over him in case some Fire Nation soldiers decided to follow him or hoping that his blonde friend would show up, but was snapped back out of his dilemma when he heard Zuko stir. Aang told him how it sucked to wake up 100 years later only to find that most of his friends he used to visit were gone, especially one from the Fire Nation. Turning towards the banished prince with a small smile, he offers him his friendship, but all he got in return was a blast of fire from the prince. Zuko watched the Avatar flee as he used the trees to escape. After Aang had left Zuko back on the forest, he returned back to the swamp to get more of those frozen frogs to heal his friends. Once he felt he had gathered enough, he headed back to where they were. Arriving tiredly, the young airbender simply slipped the frozen frogs into their mouths, claiming that it would cure if they just simply sucked on them. Then slowly he waltzed towards Appa's tail, where he dropped like a sack of potatoes and rested. While Sokka continued to suck on the frog, he turned towards Aang. "You made any new friends, Aang?" "No, I didn't," murmured the young Avatar. "What took you so long, Aang?" "I was getting worried when you didn't came back after the storm," said Katara from her sleeping bag. "It's a long story, but I met up with Naruto," replied Aang, causing Katara to sit up from her bag, despite her body protesting at such action. "Really? Where is he?" she asked him before she went into a coughing fit. "I'll tell you guys later, but he told me that he is going to meet us at the North Pole," muttered Aang as he turned over, and drifted off to sleep, leaving Sokka and Katara to continue sucking, that is until the frogs began to unfreeze and move inside their mouths, causing them to spit them out and gag while Momo just chased them around. Once she stopped coughing, Katara looked out the monuments towards the mountains and a visage of Naruto came to view. "Please, be careful, Naruto," thought the young waterbender. Meanwhile, said person was walking down the mountains after he successfully escaped from the fortress after Aang had fled. Contemplating where his next destination should be as he looked at the map, however, he didn't consider to count on the side of the mountain exploding as a creature burst out from the mountain, roaring while Naruto jumped to avoid the falling rocks, to look at the creature that stood in front of him with awe. "What a magnificent creature," muttered the blonde while he still admired such beast. The creature looked at him growling, as if challenging him to a fight, and Naruto not being one to back down, he got into his Batajutsu stance while grinning. "Bring it on!" exclaimed the blonde as he charged. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now, and share the story with your friends. Bye bye.